Together with Defense Minister Israel Katz and with the backing of all cabinet members, I instructed the Israeli army to seize the buffer zone between us and Syria and the positions controlling and adjacent to it. After the fall of the regime in Damascus,
Well, Qassam there now. Let's get more on this story. We're joined by Ashish Prashar, who's a former advisor to the Middle East peace envoy and political strategist to the Biden campaign. Thank you so much for joining us, Ashish. Give us a sense of what you make of these conflicting remarks coming from Benjamin Netanyahu and his defense minister, as some people have actually really seen it as a land grab, and perhaps there's a bet by the Prime Minister, according to some, that he sees an incoming Donald Trump administration doing nothing to reverse it.
Well, I mean, Donald Trump basically endorsed the seizure of the Golan Heights, even put I think a Trump hotel. They started to break the ground for a Trump hotel there, so I expect nothing to change. There's no conflicting statements. We know Israel's behavior in the region is to seize as much territory as possible, and they've already seized 6 times the amount of Gaza in Syria, and they're only 25 kilometers from Damascus without a shot being fired at Israeli occupation troops. This is a major breach of UN conventions. This is a major breach of sovereign territory. And Syrians have the right to defend themselves. And at some point, there will be a breakout of conflict once the fog of everything that's happened in the last week in Damascus and the overthrow of Assad has cleared. There is definitely going to be direct conflict between people in Syria and Israeli occupation forces that have done nothing but seize this land. And look, Netanyahu has always stated his intent from the beginning here. He wanted a genocide and an ethnic cleansing in Gaza. He hasn't hidden that. He wants to seize, quote unquote, a buffer zone, which is basically other wording for as much land as possible from Syria. I think you in this broadcast you mentioned the pivotal Mount Vernon. That is one of the most pivotal strategic points in the region for both the resistance, for Syrians themselves, for Israel. And by taking that, they can shell Damascus at will from Mount Hermon and not see any reply up there, as safe as possible for the Israeli occupation forces. It was always designed to do that. Now, look, there's no binary discussion here. Obviously, people should welcome the overthrow of a dictator like Assad. And watching those pictures of people being released from these torturous dungeons is like the emotion that those people have been stuck in those prisons for a decade. There is no words for that. But at the same time, it is clear that a lot of these rebels were armed, funded by Israel, the United States, and have overthrown this and also have created an environment where there's no military to push Israel back. Israel has done 200 airstrikes in 48 hours, taking apart Syria's infrastructure, taking apart all its military capabilities, taking apart all its air defenses. So whatever future government is in Damascus will be defenseless against any future Israeli aggression against them and their people.
Ashish, the last 24 hours have certainly been seen as a victory for the Syrian people, but can they, by the same prism, also be these events be looked at as a defeat for both Russia and for Iran?
I mean, it's not as plain and simple as that. I mean, a destabilized region, a destabilized Syria is a loss for people. This is a big victory for people who want to get rid of a dictator. Of course, this is a moment. But what you would have liked to have seen is the Syrian army still defend its territory from occupation from other forces, like the Israeli occupation coming in. Is this a defeat for Iran and Russia? Russia is tied up in Ukraine right now. I don't think it's a defeat for them per se. That's what the Western narrative will be. For Iran, does this stop their capabilities in the region? I don't think so. If anyone thinks that the fallless Assad is going to break the resistance, this axis of resistance that has existed between Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran. People don't know how resistance is formed in the first place. Hezbollah existed a long time before Iran was supplying the weapons, same with Hamas. And they will find ways and means to get weaponry, funding, support to their allies in the region to push back the Israeli occupiers. Now, is it like a political loss, having lost a head of state that they could rely on for things? Of course, to a degree, you could say it's a loss. But I really think in the immediate term, it's a real loss for people in the Middle East, because what's going to happen here with Israel and the United States is they're going to continue to egg more destabilization. You saw what happened in Iraq, 20 years of turmoil. That's what the United States wants. That's what Israel wants. Turmoil. This is Netanyahu's 30-year plan to destabilize and topple every regime and government in the region, to make a weaker Middle East, to make a weaker environment for the indigenous people of the region, so Israel can continue to expand its territory, continue to occupy as much as possible, and push out as many people as possible in the region.
Ashish, ultimately, Israel is not the only actor here, let's face it. So, what can be done to stop what some are saying could happen, and that's the dismemberment of Syria? And is that something which, according to some, is something which could be desirable?
Well, the dismemberment of a state that is ancient as 11,000 years old should not be desirable to anyone, right? The Syrian people have coexisted. Like I would say, like as someone who's worked in the Middle East envoy's office, a lot of the problems in the region stem from the existence of the Israeli state. The last 76 years, every problem can almost be tracked to the US support of Israel and Israel's operations in the region. Syria's existed for a very long time. The Syrian people have lived harmoniously pre-dictator and with dictators, with whether it's Shias, Sunnis, Alawites, everyone else have lived harmoniously. Now, what's caused tension in the region is the other actors that you mentioned, whether it be Israel, the United States, maybe Russia. But the reality is that the Syrian people, what's needed here is their allies in the region to help them support and uplift their government as quick as possible, that it's independent of Western-backed needs, right? I'm looking to allies who support their Muslim brothers like Turkey, Lebanon, and even the Gulf regions who, by the way, all have condemned Israel's annexing basically of Syrian territory already. We're waiting for like the Syrian Free Syrian Army to act to defend their territory. Now, they should not be giving up any territory to any other power right now. They shouldn't be toppling it into multiple regions. This is a country with a rich heritage that shouldn't be carved up like the colonial powers did to many parts of this world and this region for the last century. You only have to go back to how Palestine was occupied in the first place. You only have to go back to how they carved up Syria and Lebanon and Iraq and create Gulf states. This is the West trying to destabilize the region. This is the West trying to carve up power so there's no way to fight back against their political and military ambitions in the region. And what we need to look to is powerful nations in the region like Turkey, like even resistance power like Lebanon and everything else to support their Syrian brothers to create a strong state to defend its people.
Ashish, great talking to you. Ashish Prashar there, former advisor to the Middle East peace envoy and political strategist to the Biden campaign.